Welcome everyone to the Pick Six Podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and as a reminder, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us get these stories up and out there into the interwebs. Also, send us your story ideas to thepick6guys@gmail.com. We want to know, what do you guys want to hear and see us talk about? We've also jumped on the gram, so be sure to follow us at the Pick Six Podcast on Instagram. Guys, we have made it to the final game of the season, and would you have it, the Canes are here. So many storylines. We've got a plethora of storylines to go over before we go into this game, because guys, this game is going to be incredible. Regardless of what happens on the field, there's so much that so many people are playing for. First, I want to look at some storylines that both teams share. The first one would be the South Florida connection. This is going to be a showcase for South Florida football, or Florida football in general. The game features 67 players from Florida, highlighting the state's unmatched talent pipeline and making it a homecoming for many of these players. 67 players from Florida altogether, 59 repping the U and 9 who took their talents up north to Indiana. You have a lot of players also specifically from the Tri-County area of South Florida. You've got Miami with 27 players from Miami-Dade and Broward alone. And then there are 4 players from South Florida on Indiana's team. This means so much more, I think, to these players who are from Florida, but more specifically to these players on the Miami sidelines who chose to stay home to represent for the crib. You look at these players, they were once overlooked, some of them, by bigger, more prominent programs, and decided to take their talents here. You have players who are getting second and third chances to prove they have what it takes to win a natty and make it to the next level. You got guys like Jacoby Thomas, Keontae Scott, who went through the JUCO system and worked their way up to get here. A guy like Keontae Scott, who was able to get 1 extra year after playing at Auburn to finally prove he has what it takes to play at an NFL and championship level. And then finally, you have the South Florida connection, where you have a school split. Christopher Columbus, a local prominent high school here in Miami, has produced 7 players and coaches who will be competing in this championship game. And you can't mention Christopher Columbus without talking about the Cuban American heritage storyline, right? You have 6 to 7 players and coaches of Cuban descent. Fernando Mendoza was the first Cuban American player to win the Heisman. And then on the other side, you've got Mario Cristobal, who could be the first Cuban American head coach to win a national championship. Now, as many of you know, the Cuban community is the foundation of South Florida. At a minimum, I would call them a pillar of the South Florida community. They're inextricably locked with each other. When you think of Miami, you think of Cubans. When you think of Cubans, you think of Miami, whether it's the Domino's on 8th Street, whether it's the croquetas, the cafecitos, whatever it is, it's all, the two things are always inextricably locked together. But then there's a third component that both teams shares, and that's the transfer template. Both teams have utilized the portal to make overhauls in positions of weakness, to shore up units that were maybe efficient but needed to be stronger. And then they helped create a level of depth that allows this sport, which has been very parodied, to seem very even for a lot of teams. Indiana has 7 transfer players on both the offense and defense. Miami has 6 players from the transfer portal on offense and defense. Both teams are relying on a veteran transfer quarterback to lead their teams to victories. With either team winning, there is a changing of the guard and a pivoting in the process of building a program. Gone are the days of recruiting classes being the sole indicator of success or talent evaluation. Both coaches are giving their own blueprint into how to build a successful program. You got on one hand Mario, who is using a traditional style of recruiting the high school market while supplementing with the portal. And then you have Curt Cignetti, who is almost exclusively using the portal with a heavy emphasis on older, more experienced players, not just former 4 or 5-star athletes. And then again, speaking of Cignetti, we'll just jump into Indiana's storyline, because it's the one that's getting the most attention, and rightfully so to a certain extent, right? Indiana's having this Cinderella run. They are the most of unlikely champions. The Hoosiers aim for their first ever national title, capping a historic turnaround from a historically losing program under Curt Cignetti. Indiana finished second in most losses for FBS teams coming into the 2025 season. Even after going 11-2 in 2024, the Hoosiers still rack up 715 program losses And that was the most before at the beginning of this season for that football team. I don't mean this in an insulting way, but for all intents and purposes, for the better part of 100 years, Indiana was essentially a D2 program. They were the bottom of the barrel when it came to the Big Ten. No one took them seriously. It was the guaranteed win for almost every Big Ten team besides Purdue to schedule. And so here we have a program that has just literally was lucky to get as many wins as they have losses this year, competing for a national championship. Then you couple that with Mendoza's Heisman moment, the quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, a Cal transfer, and Heisman winner, returns to his native Miami to compete in this Hollywood-esque style story as the most unlikely top NFL draft pick. I mean, this was a kid who was overlooked by Miami and his hometown team where he wanted to play. Then he went out to Cal as a backup, worked his way up to becoming the starter, shined in last year's game against us, putting up 36 points, looking like he was going to blow out Miami, which was stellar last year at the beginning of this season. I think that game last year playing us really kind of put him on the map and made Curt Cignetti sit up in his seat and give him a little attention. But win or lose, this has been one of the greatest sports. Forget just football or college football. This has been one of the greatest sports story ever written, this whole Indiana Cinderella story, right? I mean, 2 years. I mean, we're talking about an industry that said it takes at a minimum 3 to 5 years for a coach to kind of establish his culture and his program. And you have Curt Cignetti basically flipping the script. Last year, I think they went 11-2. This year, they went undefeated. It's insane to think about what this is going into. And then on top of that, should they win on Monday, this will be undoubtedly the greatest sports story of all time. But on the other side, you have Miami. And to me, this is obviously the most important story. You have Miami's resurgence. Miami this year has been the playoff upset kings. After a shaky regular season, Miami has upset top teams like Ohio State, Texas A&M to reach the final, proving their playoff mettle. Miami nearly missed the CFP, taking at the last at-large spot from Notre Dame, starting the original rankings at number 18, only to crawl and scratch their way to the number 10 spot in the final rankings. Miami has been the dream killers this year in the CFP, taking down powerhouse Texas A&M in their best season since 1992. This team was really thinking they were going to play for the SEC championship and then at a minimum go deep inside the CFP. Then you have an Ohio State program that was looking to be the first team to win back-to-back the CFP championships. And finally, you have them knocking off the Ole Miss Rebels, who had a storybook CFP run after their head coach left them hanging at the end of the regular season to go coach at LSU. This Miami program is looking to take back its throne and prove it belongs at the top of the college football world. And now, while I understand these are storylines and these storylines are very alluring on both sides, to me, it's this one storyline that is the most near and dear to my heart. Miami is a team of destiny. The Indiana story is historic and it's Hollywood tier. It's beautiful in its own right, but it's not the main story. Miami is a program that proudly stood at the top of the college football hierarchy, ruling with bravado and incomparable talent. When you played Miami, you knew it was going to be a battle. And for many teams, Miami was their national championship. And for many competitors, they knew that the championship ran through Miami. You weren't going to play for a championship unless you beat Miami. Before Urban Meyer, before Nick Saban, before the SEC dominance, there was the Miami Hurricanes. Then they had their crown snatched, their throne taken from them. They were banished to the realm of mediocrity, forced to watch as state rivals FSU and Florida won conference titles and national championship. They watched as other out-of-state programs pillaged the high schools that were once pipelines to a dominant program. It almost felt like we were a program in exile. But Miami, they did not give up. They were a team of destiny. Miami is the only team in college football history to win a national championship on its home field in 1983, 87, and 91. And now they are hoping to be the first team to do it in the college football playoff era. And they are ready to repeat and make history happen once again. This was a team that was counted out after its second loss to SMU in week 10. Everyone thought Miami would repeat its historical late season slumps, but it did the opposite. Instead of checking out, Miami checked in. They locked in and notched out 7 straight wins, 5 of which were on the road to get to the championship game. A coaching staff that was ridiculed for years for constantly pooping the bed in big games, for being known as horrible game day managers. Then you look and we have this QB who comes in, who has been ridiculed and dragged through the national media as a bust, a bad leader, as a shallow individual, but has shown up time and time again in big games, going 17-13 against ranked opponents, having a 75% completion rating against AP ranked teams. But then you have to really, if you're a UM fan, look back at the heartache that Miami has experienced over the last 23 years. I start back in 2007, and you have the 48-0 blowout shutout loss to Virginia, which doomed and was the last game at the storied and historic Orange Bowl. We fast forward a few years later to 2010, where FSU blew out Miami in Hard Rock Stadium 45-17, which led to a 7-year losing streak. I ended up getting jumped by 9 FSU fans that year and was in the hospital. Not a great year. Then we fast forward another 5 years to 2015, where Miami lost to Cincinnati 34-23. Just a few games later, Clemson would come back into that same stadium and blow us out 58-0, the worst loss in school history, a complete dismantling by Clemson that led to Al Golden getting fired and signaled the end of an era. Then in 2017, we lost to Pitt 24-14 as the number 2 ranked team. Miami lost to a big underdog in their regular season finale, a loss that led to a blowout in the ACC championship and Orange Bowl, ending any playoff hopes. Then in 2019, we had a historic 30-24 upset that marked one of the worst losses in University of Miami football history to FIU at Marlins Park. FIU was coached by then former coach Butch Davis on the hallowed grounds of the Orange Bowl. I can't tell you how bad that loss was. I was there, and it was just, I was shell-shocked after that game because I could not believe that FSU had beaten us out. That game was probably more 30-17 because we scored that final touchdown with like 30 seconds left in the game. So FIU pretty much owned us that year. Then you jump to 2020 and we have to deal with the 62-26 rout by North Carolina, which derailed an Orange Bowl bid from us, and we weren't able to get to the postseason that year. Then we have the Middle Tennessee loss, 31-45 in 2022. We have the 45-3, Miami's worst home loss to FSU ever, where the team seemed to quit basically. And for most of us fans thought, man, I think this is the end of the program. I think this is where the program dies. And to the point to where even Kirk Herbstreit had to get on College Game Day and say, hey, is Miami in or are they out? Because this is a rudderless program at this point. And had we not gotten to that point, I don't know if we would be where we're at today. Many of us were unsure of the future of this program. We were unsure if we would ever be competitive again. Would we ever be relevant again? And then it happened. The prodigal son returned. A man who rode his bike to the Miami practice facility in the 80s as a teenager to watch the Canes, only to find himself on the national championship winning team as a player and then later as a coach, who was then run out of town because he wasn't good enough at FIU, who left a championship program in Oregon to come home and rebuild the program he loves so much. I've got my issues with Mario. I don't think he's a perfect coach, but as evident above, but there is no denying that he is the reason why we are here. It is his relentless pursuit to achieve the vision he had set out for this program that Miami is just days away from capturing its 6th national title. Hometown heroes will be playing in this game, and they are being led by their own hometown hero. But listen, storylines do not win games or hoist up national championship trophies. So let's actually get into this game. It's not complicated, guys. I mean, when you're looking at teams that are vastly different or they have talent gaps between the two, you can get into the nitty gritty, you can get into the minutia. But here you have the two best of the best teams. Granted, maybe most people didn't think Miami was one of the best teams, but if you're a Miami fan, you knew it was going to be probably us in Indiana at the end of this. These are two teams that are built very similarly and have very similar strategies to achieving success. For both, it's basically running the ball to set up an RPO, hold on to their leads with stout defenses with the ability to pressure QBs. When you look at these teams statistically, they're very even, with Indiana edging out Miami by the most minuscule of margins, right? In most categories, just barely better than Miami and a lot of these, except in points per game, yards per game, and the score margin. But that is because, in my opinion, Indiana has faced a lot more inferior opponents, specifically when you look at their out-of-conference opponents, right? Stats, like I've always said this season, can be skewed based on who you've played. And Indiana, in my opinion, has played an overrated and one of the worst Alabama teams in the last decade who couldn't run the ball, and an Oregon team that was riddled with injury. Now, yes, they played Ohio State, but they only beat Ohio State by 3 points. We beat Ohio State, I believe, by 10 points. Does that make us 10 points better than Indiana? I don't know. But this whole idea that the margin right now, I think at the time of filming this, is at 8.5 points, borderline 9 on some, is out of this world. I don't understand it. I get it. Indiana has a really good offense. They've got 2 rushers with 1,000 yards. I know Black has like 981, but that's close enough to 100. Both have 17 touchdowns combined. Then you look over through their aerial attack, and they've got 2 receivers with more than 800 yards and more than a dozen touchdowns each, not together, right? And they've got a third wide receiver threat in Becker, who's emerged in the last couple games, averaging 75 yards and a touchdown in the last 3 games. This is basically a Hydra offense that doesn't hesitate to spread the ball around. And when one weapon is covered or eliminated, they go to the other, and they're really good about it. I haven't even gotten into their tight end, who has really been good the last 2 games also. But all of this is thanks to their QB, Fernando Mendoza. But Mendoza is not this perfect pocket passer. Yes, he's won the Heisman. Yes, his stats are out of this world, but you really got to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. 27 of Mendoza's 33 touchdown passes came while playing inferior opponents. He only has 6 touchdowns against quality opponents and has coughed up 5 interceptions in those games. On average, Mendoza likes to throw about 23 times a game. And when he throws 30 attempts or more, those are the closer games. When he's below 23 attempts, in all of their blowouts, they win, right? So what does that mean? They like to run the ball. Simply put, Miami has to shut down Hemby and Black, and this will allow Indiana to be one-dimensional. I think the keys for Indiana are very, very simple. Like I said, for the Peach Bowl, it is be you, do you. As long as Indiana can protect Mendoza, they will win this game. Along with protecting Mendoza, it's running the ball that I think is going to be just as important. Indiana is averaging 200 yards a game in the CFP when it comes to rushing. Again, if you shut this run down, if you stifle this run, you will force Mendoza to throw the ball. And if you can get pressure on him, it gets even worse for him. Now, the defense, honestly, in terms of Indiana, doesn't really even need to show up if they play lights out and the aforementioned happens where you have Mendoza upright and then you have them running the ball. This defense could allow Miami to score as many as we've scored, which I think is 31 points. Indiana will score 35. Indiana will score 42. You name it, Indiana will outscore Miami. Miami does not want to get into a shootout with this game. They want to keep it low and slow, like they're smoking. This finally is the most disciplined team in all of college football and will not beat itself. They only have 6 penalties in all of the CFP. That means in the last 2 games they played, they've only had 6 penalties, 5 of which came in the last game. So they only had 1 penalty against Alabama. Super, super, super disciplined. I think when you look at it, I think Miami has 105 penalties on the season and Indiana only has 55. So Miami's basically essentially doubled their penalties. Now, let's look at keys to success for Miami, right? Same as every game, right? And it's very similar to Indiana. Be you and do you, but do you the best version of you. At the end of the day, Bain and Mesidor need to be on Mendoza like a fat kid on cake. They need to have residence in that backfield. He needs to be running for his life like Forrest Gump the entire time. On the offensive side of the ball, Carson Beck needs to manage, not force the game. If the game is put into Carson Beck's hands, not to say we'll lose the game, but I think our odds of winning this game drastically go down. Not because he's a bad quarterback, but that usually means our run game isn't working. And when we are unable to run the ball, we do not win games, or they are very close. And in a game where you're playing a incredibly disciplined and talented team in Indiana, you can't allow that margin to get too close, right? Now, I'm not going to mention weapons like, CJ Daniels or Malachi Tony or Mark Fletcher or Marty Brown, because we obviously know they all need to make plays. But I think the next thing is probably one of the most important, and I had highlighted it earlier, right? Talking about Indiana, is they have to be like Indiana and remain disciplined. Miami has the most penalties than any other team in the CFP, nearly doubling, like I said, Indiana's. Officiating has played a role in every single game and will undoubtedly play some role in Monday's game. If you think I'm lying, go back, watch the amount of holds that were not called in the Ohio State game and in the Texas A&M game, and even to a certain extent in the Ole Miss game. But the Ole Miss game, there were a lot of wacky calls and missed calls. So that kind of runs the spectrum in all of them. But the goal will be for Miami to minimize the mistakes and to really eliminate the input of the Zebras in this game. I think this game is absolutely going to be the closest game Miami has played thus far this season. I think there's going to be a razor thin margin in terms of not only points, but stats and opportunities. But we've got to pick a team. And as you guys know, I'm obviously going to pick Miami. I can't pick against Miami. I've said all season, we're a champion. For the most part, we're a championship level team. We are built to play for this. We are born to be here. But I know I've been super confident in every game leading up into this point, because I feel like this is, and rightfully so, the hardest team we're going to play. I am picking Miami 27-24. I won't like think that Indiana won't blow us out. It's very hard to look at just a few weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, we both played the same team and we played better. When you look at the Ohio State game, which is to me the only game you can really compare us and Indiana, we looked way better playing against Ohio State than Indiana did. You can't look at Oregon and you can't look at Alabama and say, hey, look at these blowout wins. Because again, to me, that side of the bracket was the weakest side of the bracket. I mean, our side had A&M, Ohio State, Georgia, Ole Miss to get here. Miami is battle tested and they're ready. I really believe Indiana is going to hit a buzzsaw and they're going to be in for a rude awakening. That doesn't mean that they can't step up to the plate and still win this game. But I'm picking Miami, like I said, 27-24. I think the Canes get it done. I think they win their 6th national championship. I'm going to lose my voice. I'm going to lose my mind. It's going to be wild. I'm probably going to be saying a lot of things online that I'll regret later. But hey, it's the national championship. YOLO, right? Well, guys, we have made it to the end. We have got another one in the books. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win this weekend. And as always, go Canes.